NASCAR has decided they will in fact penalize Noah Gragson. Is this penalty too harsh, not harsh enough, and does it succeed in establishing the line that should not be crossed? How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to a quick sort of follow-up out of the groove. Been a busy Wednesday. If you missed it earlier this morning, we talked about the recent news that Bubba Wallace is swapping some crew members with Christopher Bell in an attempt to hopefully improve the 23 team's performance on pit road. Hopefully not at the expense of Christopher Bell's performance. He's in a very precarious playoff position. We talked about that earlier this morning. We also talked about Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s reaction to this Noah Gragson incident from Road America this past Saturday. One last time, if you haven't seen the incident, he was racing against Sage Karam in the 45 car. Karam got into him a couple times. They made contact. He ran Gragson off into the dirt slightly. Gragson retaliated by door slamming him up a hill, and that set off a huge crash that took out like a dozen cars. NASCAR did not issue a penalty to the 9 team on race day, but today, Wednesday, this afternoon, they changed their mind and did hand down a penalty to Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson was fined $35,000 and docked 30 driver points and 30 owner points. Gragson, making an appearance on SiriusXM NASCAR radio earlier today, actually a little while after Dale Jr.'s appearance, he admitted that he made a mistake and said, among other things, quote, "What I would do differently is to try and keep my temper or aggression and keep that under control and try to remain cool, calm, and collected. There's a bigger picture than retaliating or getting Sage back for the multiple times that he doored us." Glad to hear him acknowledge that he overreacted, but he still throws in that thing at the end there that, Karam did get into me multiple times. He wants to make sure we all know that. I don't know. Kudos to him at least for going on the radio and addressing this head on. And Junior Motorsports, Kelly Earnhardt Miller released this statement. "We understand today's penalty. Noah is a passionate race car driver and his actions occurred in the heat of the moment. Learning how and when to keep emotions in check is all part of the learning experience." They will not appeal this penalty. There are 3 questions that we're going to try and answer here today. First, it's Wednesday. The incident happened on Saturday. Should NASCAR have called this earlier? I know I certainly would prefer NASCAR make these kinds of calls on race day, especially when we're talking about an incident that seemed pretty clear cut. It seemed obvious at the time that Gragson intentionally door slammed Karam and set off the big wreck. So if you're going to penalize him for intentionally door slamming Karam, I feel like you had enough information on Saturday to make the call pretty much right then and there. NASCAR disagreed, and while I appreciate them doing their due diligence, this statement that Bob Pockris posted today from NASCAR, I don't know, it's a little absurd. Every situation is unique, but in this case, there were significant enough concerns that due to the aggressive nature of that race, beating and banging, and the potential for mechanical failures, we wanted to discuss with Noah and look at the race car to ensure there was nothing mechanical that may have led to the incident. Parking the 9 during the event was an option, but we felt that more information was needed before making a decision on any disciplinary measures. You're kidding, right? I mean, this reminds me of when Matt Kenseth wrecked Joey Logano and said, "Oh, I had a right front go down." Like, come on. I guess I should appreciate NASCAR doing their due diligence, making sure they get it right, but I mean, this one seemed obvious. The penalty, again, was for intentionally wrecking another driver. Here's how that section of the rulebook reads. Member actions that could result in a penalty include intentionally wrecking another vehicle, whether or not that vehicle is removed from the competition as a result. They also include any actions deemed to compromise the safety of an event or otherwise pose a dangerous risk to the safety of competitors, officials, spectators, or others. So that rule is kind of vague. I mean, we see guys intentionally spin drivers out all the time. They don't typically lead to 12-car pileups, which is what happened in the case of Noah Gragson hitting Sage Karam. But in the rulebook, it says right there, you could be penalized even if the vehicle you wreck isn't removed from competition, like even if they keep going, like even if they're not junked. It's just vague. It's a little too vague. It feels like a lot of drivers could be penalized under that rule. So I don't know if that's the rule that they were following. I feel like they had enough information to make the call on race day. But anyway, that's the first question. The second question, is this penalty too harsh? Or did they not take it far enough? Did they not send enough of a message? I've seen some fans say they wanted a suspension. Others have said maybe they should have docked him some playoff points instead of just 30 regular season points. Now, it's worth noting, him losing 30 points is going to drop him at least 1 spot in the standings, which at the end of the regular season, that's worth at least 1 playoff point. But between that and, a $35,000 penalty, which, no one wants to be fined $35,000, but that is a slap on the wrist to someone like Noah Gragson, JRM. Many have argued this penalty is not steep enough. And I disagree. To me, there is no way NASCAR could have justified a steeper penalty. In my video earlier this morning, I made a comparison between how Justin Marks defended Ross Chastain and how Dale Earnhardt Jr. was talking about Noah Gragson. And in some ways that wasn't entirely accurate because what Chastain has done this year, being aggressive, isn't the same as what Gragson did at Road America, intentionally wrecking somebody in the middle of the race, in the middle of the pack. So that wasn't an exactly accurate or even comparison, but I do want to compare this incident to a specific Ross Chastain incident from earlier this year that I think we can draw some similarities between. Let's go back to Circuit of the Americas. Ross Chastain gets bumped out of the way by AJ Allmendinger, a classic bump and run, an aggressive move on the last lap, and then 2 corners later, Chastain plowed through the back of Allmendinger, knocked him up into Bowman, took both those cars out of contention, spun Allmendinger completely around, causing him to finish, I think, outside of the top 30. Chastain went on to win the race. It was an intentional move meant to take out, at the very least, AJ Allmendinger. Chastain was not penalized for that. Why wasn't there a penalty? Well, let's look at the differences between that incident and what Noah Gragson did this past weekend. Ross Chastain's, it was the last lap, going for the win. Does that make a difference? In that case, only one innocent car, Bowman, was involved, and Gragson's, there were, 10, 11 cars that got piled in as a result. So was it just optics? The NASCAR didn't like that Gragson's door slam led to a huge pileup, but Chastain, since really only one guy got taken out or got involved in it, I don't know, it's fine. I'm not trying to say what Ross Chastain did was as bad as what Noah Gragson just did. I think what Noah Gragson did was worse, or at least the result was worse. Because if we get past the fact that 12 cars piled into this wreck and only one car was involved in this wreck, Noah Gragson spinning Sage Karam because he was mad he got run off the track a couple times is very similar to Ross Chastain plowing through AJ Allmendinger because he got bumped in the previous corner. Just on the surface, there are some similarities there. And since NASCAR did not penalize Ross Chastain in any way, they can't turn around and throw the book at Noah Gragson in the same season. That's just my opinion. I think the penalty is largely justified. I think it's pretty much the right amount. I wouldn't have tweaked it much. I think the fine is reasonable. It's in the right range. The points penalty, while not playoff points, it could affect his playoff seeding at regular season's end. I think the reason Gragson got a penalty is because so many other cars were involved. And, Gragson in the moment doesn't know that a bunch of guys are going to pile into him, but this is what I said earlier in the week. You do need to have an extra layer of awareness when you're on track. It was shortly after a restart. You knew there were a lot of cars lined up behind you. You're going up over a hill, kind of a bad visibility section of the track, and I think that's why what Gragson did was certainly over the top and why that justified a penalty over what Chastain did. But that's not how the rule book is written, which is why, I do think we need to establish a more black and white line. And that's my third and final question. Does this penalty help establish that line? I'd say kind of. Like I just said, it's not perfectly black and white, the way I'd like officiating calls to be. NASCAR is full of these, you'll know it when you see it kind of calls. At the very least, this penalty does do something to show competitors that there are some things you just can't do. There are consequences if you go too far. But see, I don't think this firmly establishes that line because we've seen calls like this made in recent years. A couple of you guys on Twitter reminded me of this, but like 2 years ago at Pocono, Justin Haley in the Xfinity Series right-hooked Riley Herbst down the straightaway and got parked for 2 laps. They made that call during the race. They didn't wait until Wednesday. They called it then. 2-lap penalty for over-aggressive driving. So it's not like NASCAR hasn't been penalizing over-aggressive driving the last few years. So eventually, hopefully, that message will finally sink in. NASCAR in the 2020s is certainly officiated differently than it was in the 2000s or the 90s. It is a different culture. We're seeing that with how NASCAR views these incidents, but I'm glad there is still some sort of precedent being set. I just hope NASCAR sticks to it. I'm not always confident that they will be consistent. Fingers crossed. Anyway, share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think the penalty for Noah Gragson was too much, too little, just about right? Does this penalty set any sort of precedent, you think? Or is this the kind of thing where a month from now we'll barely remember it even happened? Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. That's gonna do it for this episode. Appreciate y'all sticking with me. It's been a busy week. Lots of content. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button because we've got lots more coming your way here over the coming days, weeks, and months. As always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters as well. I truly appreciate your generous support. We'll be back tomorrow with something a little different. I'll just plant that seed right there. A little, very different, you might say. Hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching this one, y'all. I will see you again very soon.